Hey guys, today we're setting sail, not on some cozy cruise ship with unlimited buffet access, but on a journey so epic, so utterly mind-bogglingly daring, it redefines the very word voyage. Imagine this. You're huddled on a small, open canoe, not a compass in sight, no GPS chirping helpful directions, just the vast, shimmering expanse of the Pacific Ocean stretching out before you. The sun, a relentless golden eye, beats down on your face, and the only sound is the rhythmic slap of water against the hull, a lullaby that could quickly turn into a lament. You squint at the horizon, hoping for a smudge of land, any land, but there's nothing. Just blue. Infinite, terrifying blue. And just to put a little perspective on things, statistically speaking, without the tools we take for granted today, your chances of ever seeing solid ground again are, well, let's just say they're not exactly in your favor. Most of us probably wouldn't last a week. You'd be calling for a rescue helicopter faster than you can say, "Mayday, my phone battery is at 2%. But these aren't just any sailors. These are the Polynesian Navigators, architects of one of humanity's greatest stories of exploration. A saga written not with ink on paper, but with wind, waves, and an almost mystical understanding of the natural world. Now picture yourself as one of them thousands of years ago. You're not just going on a trip, you're embarking on a migration. Your entire world, your family, your future, is packed onto a vessel made from wood and fibers, propelled by paddles and the whispers of the wind. The sheer audacity of it hits you like a rogue wave. This isn't about reaching a known destination. It's about finding one that might not even exist, a needle in the largest haystack on Earth. The Pacific Ocean, you see, isn't just big. It's staggeringly, incomprehensibly immense. It covers nearly a third of the Earth's surface, a watery realm dotted with islands that are often no more than specks, mere pinpricks on an otherwise unbroken canvas of blue. For a mainstream historical fact, consider this. The Polynesian expansion, specifically the Lapita culture's journey, is believed by many scholars to have originated from Taiwan, gradually spreading eastward across Melanesia, and then into the vast, uninhabited reaches of Polynesia, covering distances that would make modern sailors with their satellite navigation systems blanch. You feel the slight shift in the air, a subtle coolness that hints at an approaching squall, even when the sky above you is still blindingly bright. Your elder, sitting stoically at the stern, doesn't even glance up. He feels it too in his bones, in the way the air tastes, in the dance of the clouds you can barely perceive at the very edge of vision. They knew the ocean not as a barrier, but as a living, breathing entity, a complex system of currents, swells, winds, and animal life, all offering clues to their position and direction. It's like trying to read a book where every page is written in a different secret code, and your life depends on deciphering every single one. You'd think they'd be constantly terrified, but there's a quiet confidence, born of generations of accumulated knowledge. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. These ancient mariners didn't just carry food and water. They often brought entire ecosystems with them. We're talking taro, breadfruit, yams, pigs, chickens, and even dogs. Imagine trying to keep a pig happy and healthy on a small, rocking canoe for weeks or months. It must have been quite the fragrant journey, perhaps less sleepy ASMR and more sleepy farm animal sounds. But it speaks to their incredible planning and foresight, turning these small vessels into veritable floating arcs, designed to establish new colonies from scratch. They weren't just exploring. They were transplanting entire societies. The days blend into an endless cycle of sunrises and sunsets, each one a fiery spectacle that offers a fleeting moment of beauty before the deep anxieties of the journey creep back in. You learn to read the color of the water, the patterns of the waves, the direction of the swells. These aren't just random movements. They're echoes of distant islands, refracted around landmasses hundreds of miles away. It's a navigational system so intricate, so deeply integrated with the natural world, that it makes our modern reliance on glowing screens feel almost childish. Historians still argue whether their initial long-distance voyages were intentional explorations driven by curiosity, or if they were often accidental drift voyages followed by deliberate return trips or planned colonization efforts. Some suggest that population pressures or resource scarcity spurred these epic journeys, while others point to a sheer adventurous spirit. Whatever the initial impetus, the results were undeniable. The settlement of an entire ocean. You run your hand over the rough wood of the canoe, feeling the vibrations of the ocean beneath you, and a strange sense of connection washes over you. This isn't just wood. It's a testament to human ingenuity, a fragile shell carrying the dreams and dangers of an entire civilization. You feel the rhythmic sway of the twin hulls beneath you, a living beast carved from ancient timber. The vast, inky expanse of the Pacific stretches endlessly, a canvas of indigo and silver under a sky so immense it feels like a personal challenge. Salt spray kisses your face, stinging and invigorating, as the enormous crab-claw sail strains against the wind, pulling you deeper into the unknown. The only sound is the creak of the lashings, the whisper of the wind through the rigging, and the steady thrum of the ocean against the hull. The air is thick with the scent of salt water, and the faint, earthy aroma of the provisions stored below deck: dried fish, fermented breadfruit, and the unique, musky scent of a dozen pigs and chickens bundled in their own makeshift enclosures. And just for a moment, as you watch a distant storm cloud gather on the horizon, a cold knot tightens in your stomach. Because let's be honest, out here with nothing but wood and woven fibers between you and the deep, dark abyss, you probably won't survive this. Not if the sea has other plans. Yet this is precisely what thousands of your ancestors did, time and time again, pushing the boundaries of human endurance and ingenuity, venturing into the world's largest ocean with nothing but their wits and their incredible vessels. These aren't your typical leaky rowboats, prone to capsizing if you sneeze too hard. Oh no, we're talking about ocean-going marvels, engineering wonders of their age, the double-hulled voyaging canoes or waiakalua. Imagine two sleek, finely crafted hulls, often fashioned from colossal breadfruit or acacia trees, hollowed out with stone adzes and fire. These twin hulls, perhaps 60 to 80 feet long or even more, are then lashed together with literally miles of coir rope. Coconut fiber, by the way, remarkably strong and resistant to saltwater decay. Think of it as nature's original biodegradable duct tape, but infinitely more sophisticated. On top of these parallel hulls, a substantial platform was built, providing space for the large crew, the vital cargo of plants and animals, and even a small hut or shelter for respite from the elements. It was like a floating apartment complex, except your neighbors were probably more prone to seasickness, and your commute was entirely vertical. The heart of their propulsion system was the immense, often triangular or crab-claw-shaped sail, typically woven with painstaking precision from pandanus leaves. These sails were incredibly efficient at catching even the lightest breezes, propelling the canoes at speeds that would make a modern sailing enthusiast gasp. There were no complex pulleys or winches here. just sheer ingenuity in how the mast and sail were rigged and controlled, often by hand, with the crew expertly trimming and adjusting to harness every whisper of wind. It really puts your weekend kayaking trip into perspective, doesn't it? When you consider these were vessels that could cover hundreds, even thousands of miles. So, why bother with all this perilous travel? The prevailing theory points to a complex interplay of factors. Population pressure on increasingly limited island resources, a deep-seated spirit of exploration, and perhaps even a bit of youthful wanderlust on the part of adventurous chiefs. The initial waves of migration, starting around 3,500 years ago, saw people, likely originating from what is now Taiwan, pushing south and east through the Philippines and Indonesia. This wasn't a reckless, haphazard dash into the void. This was a methodical, carefully considered expansion, a process of island hopping and consolidation. You'd settle an island, cultivate resources, establish a thriving community, allow your population to grow, and then, perhaps a few generations later, launch new expeditions from that established base. Each island served as a launching pad for the next leg of the journey, like a cosmic game of leapfrog across the Pacific. This initial eastward expansion is intrinsically linked to the archaeological evidence of the Lapita culture. This distinct group, easily identifiable by their unique pottery designs, geometric patterns meticulously incised onto reddish-brown clay, are considered the direct ancestors of the Polynesians. Their pottery shards, found across a vast swathe of the Pacific from Melanesia to western Polynesia, tell a profound story of rapid expansion and remarkable cultural cohesion. It's one of those rare instances where ceramics don't just hold your tea, but an entire civilization's narrative, etched into humble clay. It's a mainstream historical fact that few outside of archaeology circles fully appreciate. And here's a quirky tidbit for your sleepy brain to ponder. Some researchers hypothesize that these early voyagers might have intentionally carried not just staple crops like taro and yams, and essential livestock like pigs and chickens, but also specific types of beneficial insects and even earthworms. Think of it as a meticulously curated biological toolkit, designed to help establish new, viable ecosystems on previously uninhabited islands. So, while you were worried about forgetting your toothbrush on your last trip, they were meticulously packing tiny bugs for their grand ecological engineering projects. It makes you wonder if they had a designated bug carrier, perhaps a very patient individual named Bari. Historians still argue whether some of the very earliest long-distance voyages into the deep Pacific were primarily accidental drifts, perhaps canoes blown off course during fishing trips, discovering new lands purely by chance, or if they were always deliberate, exploratory missions undertaken with a clear intent to find new homes. While later voyages clearly show incredible navigational skill and precise intent, the initial pushes into truly uncharted waters remain a point of fascinating debate among scholars. Was it a calculated risk, a testament to their unwavering spirit of discovery, or just a very, very strong, serendipitous gust of wind? Regardless of the precise trigger, these voyages marked the dawn of human presence across the vast blue continent, setting the stage for the incredible navigational feats that would follow. 3 stars, your celestial compass. Learn how Polynesians transformed the night sky into an intricate living map for their epic journeys. You're out there, adrift on the vast, inky canvas of the Pacific night. The canoe, a mere speck, glides under a canopy of stars so dense, so dazzling, It feels like you could reach up and pluck a handful of shimmering diamonds. There's no light pollution here, no city glow to dilute the raw, unfiltered brilliance of the cosmos. Every single star, every pinprick of distant sun, feels intimately close, whispering secrets only the true navigators can hear. You might be feeling a bit disoriented right now, a tiny tremor of panic, because if you're like me, your phone's GPS probably just died. And without that glowing rectangle, let's be honest, you'd be utterly lost trying to find your way home from the grocery store, let alone across an ocean. But for the Polynesian voyagers, these celestial beacons weren't just pretty twinkles. They were the very threads of their survival, an ancient, living GPS system far more reliable than anything we've concocted with silicon and satellites. And if you got it wrong, well, let's just say your odds of becoming fish food would dramatically increase. You probably wouldn't survive this. No second chances out here. Remember that feeling of daunting challenge we talked about out here in the vast Pacific? This is where the true genius emerges. Their secret? They didn't just look at the stars, they lived them. Imagine growing up with the night sky as your ultimate textbook, where every constellation was a lesson, every planet a page turned. From infancy, these navigators were immersed in the celestial ballet. They learned to identify hundreds of stars, not just by name, but by their precise rising and setting points along the horizon. This wasn't a casual hobby. It was a rigorous, lifelong education, often passed down through generations in hushed tones, chanted poems, and mnemonic devices, because they probably didn't have tick-tock tutorials for star navigation back then, which is a shame, because I'd watched that. The key to their stellar navigation was a deep understanding of what's known as the star compass. This wasn't a physical object, but a mental construct, a sophisticated mental map of the horizon divided into specific directional points, each aligned with the rising or setting of a particular star or constellation. Think of it as a giant, invisible dial around your canoe, with hundreds of precise markers. As the Earth rotated, the stars appeared to move across the sky, but their rising and setting points remained consistent. So if you knew that the star Vega always rose directly to the northeast of your home island, you could simply keep Vega on your starboard bow at dawn, and you'd be heading home. It sounds simple, right? But the complexity was in the sheer volume of knowledge. The rising and setting points of specific stars were fundamental to their system, acting as fixed points on a moving chart. Polaris, the North Star, was relatively stable in the northern hemisphere, but in the southern hemisphere, stars like the Southern Cross were used, not just for direction, but by tracking their zenith passage. The moment they passed directly overhead to gauge latitude. Imagine, if you will, a sort of mental map, a star compass or wind compass, often depicted as a circle or a series of cardinal and intercardinal points around the canoe. Navigators would project these known star paths onto this mental construct, essentially creating a 360-degree, fluid navigational diagram around them. It wasn't just about knowing where a star rose, but understanding its entire arc through the night sky relative to their vessel. They knew that as they sailed, different stars would pass directly overhead at different latitudes. By observing which stars reached their zenith, they could determine their north-south position. It was like having a cosmic GPS, but one that required years of intense, hands-on learning rather than a quick download. This was deep, embodied knowledge, where the sky wasn't just above them, but an extension of their very being. Of course, the stars weren't always visible. What happens when the clouds roll in, turning the night sky into a featureless gray blanket. That's where the truly multi-sensory aspect of Polynesian navigation came into play. But for now, let's stick with the stars. A cloudy night was a challenge, a test of their preparedness and their reliance on other cues. Your inner meteorologist, however, might be on strike. They would have to resort to swell patterns, wind direction, and the subtle feel of the canoe, all integrated into a holistic understanding of their environment. Yet when the stars returned, they were the ultimate reassurance. Even today, historians still argue whether some of the truly epic, far-flung voyages were purely intentional, meticulously planned exploratory missions, or if a significant number were, at least in part, accidental drift voyages that nevertheless yielded incredible discoveries. Regardless, the ability to find your way back, or to reach a new destination once discovered, unequivocally relied on this profound celestial literacy. It was a symbiotic relationship. The vast ocean provided the path, and the glittering heavens provided the map. And with every journey, every successful landfall, the tapestry of their knowledge grew richer, weaving a legacy of unparalleled maritime prowess across the world's largest ocean. You feel the first whisper of dawn on your face, not just a shift in the light, but a physical sensation, a gentle warmth that promises the day's relentless heat. You're still bobbing, a tiny speck on the vast, breathing chest of the Pacific, and as the sun begins its slow, majestic ascent, painting the horizon in hues of peach and gold, you instinctively turn towards it. It's more than just a sunrise. It's your morning briefing, your daily recalibration. Forget your fancy GPS, your digital maps, your entire concept of a fixed compass heading. For thousands of years, this celestial body, so familiar it's almost mundane, was the ultimate non-negotiable director of your life at sea. You learn to read the sun not just as a light source, but as a pendulum, swinging across the sky with predictable, yet subtly varying precision. At dawn, its rising point marks due east, or close enough for government work, especially if you're heading generally west. And as it climbs, you track its arc, the way it leans, the height it achieves at its zenith. This peak, this precise moment when the sun stands directly above you, or reaches its highest point in the sky for the day, is your navigational gold. It tells you your latitude. If the sun passes directly overhead, you know you're somewhere near the equator. The further north or south it dips in its daily arc, the further you are from that invisible celestial line. It's like a celestial plumb bob, indicating your north-south position without a single instrument. Of course, you're constantly moving, the canoe is pitching, and if you misjudge that zenith by even a degree or two, well, you probably won't survive this particular history lesson. Just a friendly reminder. And it's not just its daily arc. You've had to commit to memory the sun's seasonal shifts. Remember how back on land, you used to grumble about daylight saving, or the way the sunset time changed throughout the year. Here, those changes aren't an inconvenience, they're vital clues. The sun's rising and setting points move significantly from the summer solstice to the winter solstice, tracing a wider arc in summer, a narrower, lower one in winter. Polynesian navigators, often called master observers, knew these shifts intimately, adjusting their mental compasses accordingly. They could tell you, without a calendar, exactly what season it was just by observing where the sun bade its daily farewell. It's a bit like knowing your best friend's favorite coffee order. It seems trivial until you desperately need caffeine, and they're the only barista around. Historians still argue whether individual navigators had highly personalized, almost secret, methods for interpreting these solar cues. or if there was a more standardized, widespread curriculum passed down through generations. Was it like learning a common language, or was it more like improvisational jazz, where everyone had their own riff on the same melody? What is known, however, is that they used techniques like the sun compass, not a physical device you hold in your hand, but a mental one. They'd observe the sun's shadow cast by a vertical stick on the canoe deck, noting its length and direction at various times of the day. This allowed them to hold a course, even if clouds momentarily obscured the sun itself. It was the original set it and forget it, until the clouds returned, of course. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, a new guide emerges, the moon. You might think of the moon primarily as a light in the darkness, a romantic orb. But for the Polynesian navigator, it was a clock, a calendar, and another dynamic compass. Just like the sun, the moon rises and sets at different points on the horizon depending on its phase. A new moon, virtually invisible, rises and sets with the sun, so it's not much help directionally. But a full moon, oh, that's your nighttime sun. It rises around sunset and sets around sunrise, directly opposite the sun, marking its own clear east-west line. And as the moon waxes and wanes through its lunar cycle, its rising and setting points shift along the horizon in a predictable, though complex, pattern. If you know the moon's phase, a sliver crescent, a half-moon, a gibbous sphere, you know roughly where it should be at any given time of the night. You understand its dance with the sun. When the moon is in its first quarter, it rises around noon and sets around midnight. If it's in its last quarter, it rises around midnight and sets around noon. It's like having a celestial timetable, except this timetable is constantly changing its arrival and departure gates. Mainstream historical consensus confirms that the Polynesians meticulously tracked these lunar shifts, not just for navigation, but also for timing planting, fishing, and cultural ceremonies. They had names for each moon phase, each linked to specific observations and predictions. It wasn't just about new moon or full moon. It was about the thin moon that rises with the birds, or the pregnant moon that brings the big tides. And yes, the moon's gravitational pull, which causes the tides, was another layer of navigational information. While the core prompt is about directional cues, understanding tidal patterns, especially around islands and reefs, was an indirect but crucial part of their lunar knowledge. Imagine trying to park your boat without knowing if the water level is going to drop 20 feet in the next hour. Good luck with that. This sophisticated, multi-layered understanding of the sun and moon, not as static points, but as dynamic, interacting celestial bodies, allowed them to navigate vast distances, day or night, through the seemingly endless blue. You've squinted at the sun, felt the moon's ethereal tug, and envisioned the grand celestial sphere as your personal, cosmic GPS. You've learned to read the heavens like an open book, but now, as the stardusted velvet of night descends, another, more profound teacher emerges from the very depths of the sea. Close your eyes for a moment if you dare. Feel it? Not the immediate chop of wind-driven waves, not the dizzying pitch and roll from a rogue gust, but something deeper. A persistent, unyielding rhythm that vibrates through the very timbers of your canoe, through the soles of your feet, right into the core of your being. This, my friend, is the ocean's heartbeat, the subtle underlying pulse of the earth manifesting as vast, tireless ocean swells. Imagine for a second that the Pacific isn't just a flat, blue expanse, but a colossal, ever-shifting canvas painted with invisible lines of energy. These aren't your typical, angry, white-capped waves generated by the local squall that just dumped a bucket of cold water over your head. Oh no. These are the veterans, the long-haul travelers. Swells are born from distant storms, perhaps thousands of miles away, great atmospheric engines churning up the surface of the sea. Once they leave the chaos of their birth, they settle into long, orderly processionals, marching across the ocean basin with an almost geological patience. They're like the wise, silent elders of the wave family, carrying information from far-off lands without uttering a single word. For you, the intrepid Polynesian navigator, these swells are an intricate, multi-layered map, etched not in ink, but in the very movement beneath your hull. Your senses, honed by generations of voyaging, become exquisitely attuned. You don't just see the swells. You feel them, you hear them. You interpret their subtle changes as intimately as you would a loved one's whispered secret. It's a sensory immersion so complete, it borders on the spiritual. You're not just riding the ocean, you're becoming a part of it. There are, broadly speaking, two main types of swells you'll be paying attention to. First, the dominant or primary swells. These are the reliable workhorses, usually generated by the persistent trade winds. They come from a consistent direction, day after day, week after week, like a faithful compass needle pointing true. They're your baseline, your unchanging reference point in a world of flux. You'll feel their steady push and lift, a gentle rock that tells you, without fail, which way the prevailing winds are blowing, and thus, where your general heading lies. This is the easy bit, the part that makes you feel like you're actually getting somewhere without just paddling in circles. You might even find yourself humming along to their rhythm after a while. But then, it gets fascinatingly complex. Enter the secondary swells. These are the clever, chatty ones. Imagine a wave born thousands of miles away, traveling in one direction. It encounters a distant island, a landmass far beyond your visual horizon, and what happens? It doesn't just stop. It bends, it refracts around the island, and crucially, it reflects off its shores, sending a distinct, altered wave pattern back out into the open ocean. It's like a watery echo, a silent sonar ping bouncing off unseen land. These reflected swells arrive from different angles, interacting with the primary swells and creating intricate interference patterns. A crosshatch of ripples and pushes that are unique indicators of land nearby. This is where the true genius, and the sheer impossibility for the uninitiated, comes into play. You see, a skilled Polynesian navigator, one who has spent a lifetime on the water, could detect these subtle alterations in swell patterns from dozens, sometimes even hundreds of miles away. This isn't just a fringe theory, it's a mainstream historical fact, meticulously documented by ethnographers and modern recreations. They weren't just looking for land. They were listening to the land's distant whisper carried on the waves. You'd likely be far too busy trying to keep your breakfast down to notice anything other than the general up-and-down motion. In fact, if you tried to rely solely on your untrained perception of swells, you'd probably drift aimlessly until you became a rather unfortunate, if well-fed, meal for the local marine life. That's your daily dose of you probably won't survive this reality. Sorry, not sorry. To truly read these swells, a navigator wouldn't just stand up and glance. Oh no, it's far more intimate. They might lie flat on the canoe's deck, pressing their ear to the hull, feeling the nuances of the water's vibration directly through the wood. They'd become a living sensor, their body a finely tuned instrument. Think about it. Every subtle change in the canoe's pitch, roll, and yaw tells a story. A slight, almost imperceptible lift from one direction followed by a gentle dip from another. Each interaction of swells, each confluence of wave patterns, paints a unique picture of the surrounding ocean. It's a symphony of subtle movements, and the navigator is conducting it with their entire being. Historians still debate the precise extent to which different swell systems were consciously read, versus being an intuitive, almost subconscious, part of the navigator's holistic understanding of the ocean. Was it a calculated science or an almost innate art? Probably a bit of both, honestly. It's not like they had a little wave map app on their smartphone. And speaking of maps, some cultures, particularly the Marshall Islanders, who, while distinct from Polynesians, shared similar navigation principles, even created stick charts, intricate lattices of sticks and shells representing islands and the swells that curved around them. While not directly Polynesian, these demonstrate the abstract understanding of swell patterns that was common in the region. It's like a rudimentary, three-dimensional representation of wave mechanics, entirely alien to our modern, grid-based mapping systems. Imagine trying to explain that to your average cartographer. They'd probably just stare at you, then slowly back away. The complexity of these interference patterns where primary and secondary swells meet and create a jumble of cross currents is where the masterful navigator truly shone. It's not just about feeling a swell, but discerning multiple swells, each with its own rhythm and direction, all interacting. It's like listening to 5 different conversations at once and extracting meaningful information from each of them. For us, it would be sensory overload. For them, it was the key to their survival, the constant, unwavering voice of the ocean guiding them home. They understood that the sea, in all its vastness, was never truly silent, always singing its secret songs, always sending its rhythmic pulses across the deep. You felt the vast, slow breath of the ocean beneath you, haven't you? That deep, ancient rhythm of the swells, always there, always a guide, even when your eyes strained against the endless blue. But now, as the sun begins its slow ascent, painting the eastern horizon in hues of rose and gold, lift your gaze just a little higher. Feel that gentle caress against your cheek, that almost imperceptible whisper. That, my friend, is your next guide, a force far more immediate, far more capricious, yet utterly predictable once you learn its language: the wind. Imagine being out here, the vast Pacific stretching in every direction, a liquid plain under a sky so immense it feels like a cosmic dome. No compass beeping, no GPS telling you to turn left in 500 feet. Just you, your canoe, and the intricate, ever-shifting currents of the atmosphere. Get this wrong, misread a gust, ignore a persistent breeze, and you won't just miss your destination by a few nautical miles. You'll become a permanent resident of the deep, a rather undignified end to an epic journey, don't you think? You probably won't survive this. The ancient navigators, these oceanic whisperers, understood that the Pacific wasn't just a watery expanse. It was a grand, living machine, powered by predictable wind patterns. For centuries, these explorers rode the reliable highways of the atmosphere, primarily the trade winds. Think of them as the planet's natural conveyor belts, those consistent easterly breezes in the tropics that blow day in and day out, like a diligent but invisible postal worker. They knew that if you wanted to head west, you just unfurled your sail, pointed your bow, and let the wind do the heavy lifting. It was like having a giant, unseen hand gently pushing you along, except this hand was made of invisible air molecules with serious ambition. But it wasn't just about riding a single current. Oh no, that would be far too simple, wouldn't it? These navigators were masters of what's called tacking and veering, not just sailing directly with the wind, but using its angles to their advantage. Imagine trying to get a sailboat to go directly into the wind today. It just won't happen. You zigzag, right? You use the wind's pressure on your sail to generate lift, propelling you forward even when your destination is, counterintuitively, upwind. The Polynesians perfected this. Their ingenious sail designs, particularly the distinctive crab claw or lateen sails, some historians refer to them collectively as Polynesian spritzels due to their unique rigging, were marvels of aerodynamic efficiency. These sails weren't just big sheets of woven pandanus. They were meticulously crafted airfoils, capable of generating impressive lift and allowing canoes to sail at incredibly acute angles to the wind. It was like they were coaxing the wind to give them a sideward shove that somehow translated into forward motion. Honestly, it's almost magic. The shape of the sail itself was crucial. Unlike the square sails of European ships that were excellent for downwind voyages, but struggled against the breeze, the Polynesian V-shaped or triangular sails acted more like a modern airplane wing, generating lift when the wind passed over them. This allowed them to point higher into the wind, meaning they could sail much closer to the direction the wind was blowing from, dramatically reducing the amount of zigzagging needed to reach a destination. It's the difference between trying to paddle a canoe straight against a river current and strategically angling your paddle to let the current assist you. One is exhausting. The other is, well, still exhausting, but at least you're going somewhere. Beyond the prevailing winds, there were the subtle local gusts, the daily sea breezes that kick up in the afternoon, or the cooler land breezes that drift out to sea at night. These mariners could read the wind not just by how it felt on their skin or how it filled their sails, but by its ripple on the water's surface, by the flight patterns of birds returning to land, and even by the shape and movement of clouds. A certain type of cloud formation, a specific scudding pattern, might indicate an approaching squall or a shift in wind direction, giving them precious hours to prepare. They were literally watching the weather unfold in real time, without a single satellite image or a chirpy meteorologist on the morning news. Historians still argue whether the primary guidance came from the deep ocean swells we discussed earlier, or from the ever-present, ever-changing winds. It's a bit like asking if your car needs gas more than it needs wheels. Both are indispensable. But the wind offered immediate feedback, a constant dialogue between vessel and atmosphere. You could feel its strength, its subtle shifts, and adjust your course, your sail, your very trim in response. They understood that a slight shift in wind direction, even a few degrees, could mean the difference between making landfall and drifting into the vast, unknown expanses of the open ocean. It wasn't just about feeling the wind. It was about anticipating it, about knowing its moods and its patterns, about almost smelling its intentions. Sometimes, after days or weeks at sea, a navigator might detect a subtle change in the air, a faint scent carried on the breeze, the smell of damp earth or flowering plants, or even the unique aroma of a specific island's vegetation, long before land was visible. It was like a biological wind vane, an olfactory compass pointing them home. This quirky tidbit highlights just how intimately connected these mariners were to every aspect of their environment. They weren't just using their eyes. They were using their noses, their skin, every single sense available to them to piece together the grand puzzle of navigation. So, as you drift further into sleep, imagine yourself on that ancient canoe. Feel the wind whip your hair, hear it hum through the rigging, Feel the canvas of the sail swell and strain against its ropes. Your life, your journey, literally hangs on your ability to listen to that wind, to understand its whispers, and to respond. It's a dance, a partnership between human ingenuity and the raw power of nature. And for thousands of years, these incredible navigators led that dance, one breath of wind at a time. You've been out here for days, maybe weeks. The sun, your steadfast guide, has dipped below the horizon countless times, leaving you under the familiar, sprawling tapestry of stars. The ocean, your constant companion, hums its ancient lullaby, a rhythmic pulse beneath your canoe that you've come to know better than your own heartbeat. You felt the wind shift and whisper new directions, adjusting your sail with a practiced ease, riding the very breath of the world. But as a new day dawns, painting the eastern sky in hues of soft pinks and oranges, your gaze isn't fixed on the horizon for land, not yet. Instead, you're scanning the heavens, searching for something far more subtle, something that whispers promises of solid ground long before you can ever lay eyes on it. The clouds. It's not just any cloud, of course. Not the lazy, drifting fluff of a fair-weather day, nor the ominous, brooding storm clouds that promise nothing but a thoroughly unpleasant, possibly life-threatening shower. No, what you're looking for is a particular kind of glow, a soft, almost imperceptible brightening on the underside of distant clouds. This isn't the sun peeking through. This is light reflecting from shallow lagoons, from the dazzling white sands of an atoll just beyond the curve of the earth. Imagine trying to spot a lighthouse from 1,000 miles away. Only the lighthouse is actually the sun, and the light you're seeing is bouncing off a giant, natural swimming pool. It's navigation by reflection, a cosmic billiard shot, if you will, played on the grandest scale. This phenomenon, known as cloud glow or cupua to some, was a secret language of the sky, a spectral beacon that only the initiated could truly decipher. And then there are the high islands, the volcanic peaks that pierce the sky. These create their own distinct atmospheric signatures. As the warm, moist ocean air sweeps in, it hits these towering landmasses, rising, cooling, and condensing into telltale cloud formations. You might see a persistent cap of cloud clinging to a peak, like a fluffy hat permanently fixed to a mountain's head, or long, linear cloud streets forming downwind, like a celestial arrow pointing directly to the land itself. These aren't just pretty shapes in the sky. They are massive, floating signposts, each one a crucial clue in a puzzle whose answer means survival. You're not just sailing. You're reading the sky's tea leaves, hoping they spell out paradise ahead and not eternal drift. Because, let's be honest, misinterpret these signs, and you probably won't survive this. Your chances of becoming fish food increase dramatically, and nobody wants that on their resume. It is a mainstream historical fact that Polynesian navigators meticulously observed these cloud formations, classifying them based on their appearance and what they indicated about the proximity and nature of land. They understood that the presence of stationary clouds, especially those that didn't move with the prevailing wind, often indicated an island beneath them, acting as an anchor in the dynamic atmosphere. This was a sophisticated application of meteorological observation, far beyond what most contemporary European mariners were capable of without instruments. It wasn't guesswork. It was a deeply ingrained, orally transmitted science, honed over centuries of audacious voyages. A particularly fascinating, albeit less universally known, technique involved looking for clouds that appeared stuck or unnatural in their movement. Imagine a cloud that looks like it's perpetually on a coffee break, while all its cloud buddies are rushing off to their next appointment. This lazy cloud was often a sign of land, a localized microclimate effect. It's like that one relative at Thanksgiving who just sits on the couch and refuses to move, while everyone else is scurrying around. Except this relative is made of water vapor and leads you to land, which is far more useful than another slice of pumpkin pie. Some navigators even claim to discern the type of island, high volcanic or low-lying atoll, by the specific quality of the cloud glow or the shape of the condensation. It's like differentiating between a city skyline and a suburban sprawl just by the reflections on the clouds above. Pretty neat, right? Beyond the reflections and the orographic uplift, you also learn to spot the subtle cumulus clouds that tend to form over land during the heat of the day. As the land warms faster than the surrounding ocean, it creates thermal updrafts, coaxing wisps of cloud into existence that would otherwise be absent over the open sea. These aren't always big, dramatic thunderheads. Sometimes they are just scattered, fluffy bits, but their very presence, their specific arrangement, tells a story. They might dissipate as evening approaches, another sign, another whisper from the land sending its message into the sky. It's a constant, dynamic dialogue between the earth, the ocean, and the atmosphere, and you, the navigator, are fluent in its every nuance. And remember that connection between birds and land we touched on earlier. Well, clouds can be part of that equation too. Often, land-based birds, like terns and boobies, will fly out to fish in the morning and return to their roosts on land in the evening. These birds often use thermal updrafts, which can be marked by specific cloud formations, particularly as they head out or return. So you're not just looking at the birds themselves, but also the ephemeral aerial trails they might create, or the clouds that signify the very air currents they're riding. It's an ecosystem of clues, all working in concert. Historians still argue whether the most advanced aspects of cloud navigation were common knowledge among all Polynesian mariners, or if they were specialized skills, taught only to a select few navigators, guarding their secrets like a magician protects his best tricks. Was it an open textbook for all, or a closely guarded family heirloom passed down through generations of master wayfinders? Regardless of its exclusivity, the very existence of such precise and sophisticated meteorological knowledge speaks volumes about the incredible observational powers and intellectual prowess of these ancient voyagers. You find yourself humbled, learning to read these fleeting signals, understanding that every ripple, every shift in the air, every subtle tint in the clouds is a chapter in the unfolding story of your journey. You are no longer just sailing across the ocean. You are becoming part of its intricate, living tapestry, guided by its subtle, yet profound language. 8 birds, flying land detectors. Observe how the movements and species of birds offered invaluable clues about proximity to unseen shores. As you gaze at the horizon, where those subtle cloud formations hinted at distant land, your attention begins to shift from the sky's grand, sweeping gestures to its smaller, swifter inhabitants. The birds, in the immense, featureless expanse of the open Pacific, where every wave looks like the last and the next, a lone bird could be your entire navigational team. It's like being in a cosmic game of Where's Waldo? But Waldo can fly at 50 miles per hour, and you're relying on his dinner plans to find your way home. You quickly learn to discern the difference between a seabird, content to spend its entire existence riding the thermals far from land, and a land-dwelling species, whose very presence is a feathered beacon. A frigate bird, with its immense wingspan and unmistakable forked tail, might seem like a permanent fixture of the sky, Yet even these masters of aerial existence have limits. They need land, eventually, to roost and nest. So if you spot one heading purposefully in a particular direction at dawn, and then returning from that same direction at dusk, you've essentially just found your own personal, organic, avian GPS system. Follow that bird, and there's a good chance it's leading you to a continental breakfast, Polynesian style. This wasn't some casual observation. It was a deeply ingrained life-or-death skill, honed over generations. Imagine the quiet intensity as a navigator would stand, eyes squinting against the relentless glare, watching for the telltale speck on the horizon. It's not just any bird, it's the right bird. Boobies, terns, and noddies, for instance, are the suburbanites of the bird world. They like to commute. They'll fly out to sea to fish during the day, but they absolutely must return to land by nightfall. If you see them diligently flying in one direction in the morning, and then the reverse in the evening, you can bet your entire stock of fermented taro that there's land in that flight path. The sheer volume of this natural data was staggering. Navigators weren't just looking at one bird, but patterns, species, flight altitudes, and even their behavior. A bird struggling against a headwind might indicate a strong current, or perhaps an approaching storm front. A flock of birds, wheeling and diving, could signal a schooling of fish, which often congregate near submerged reefs or island shelves. It's a complex, multi-layered puzzle, and if you get it wrong, well, you probably won't survive this. Misinterpreting a tired gull for a homeward-bound tern might just lead you to a watery grave, wondering why that land was so terribly wet and salty. Historians still argue whether the Polynesians actively trained specific birds, like frigate birds, to act as living compasses, releasing them and observing their flight paths. While some accounts suggest this practice existed, the extent of its systematic application remains debated. It's certainly a quirky thought, isn't it? A tiny feathered scout, dispatched with the hopes of an entire canoe resting on its instincts. What is a mainstream historical fact, however, is that navigators not only understood the daily routines of these birds, but also their migratory patterns. Certain species of shorebirds, for example, would only appear in the deep ocean during specific seasons, signaling the proximity of significant landmasses, not just small atolls, but larger islands or even continents. This was far more sophisticated than simply following a bird home. It was a deep ecological understanding, an intimate knowledge of the living map around them. Remember that celestial map you were charting with the stars. This is the terrestrial version, drawn by wings and instinct. It's a subtle dance between the human mind and the natural world, a testament to an intelligence that looked not just at nature, but through it, deciphering its every nuanced whisper. The more you learn about these ancient voyagers, the more you realize that every ripple, every gust, every distant cry of a bird was a data point in their grand, audacious quest for new horizons. You lean over the side of your double-hulled canoe, the salt spray a familiar kiss on your lips, the rhythmic creak of the lashings a lullaby. Below you, the vast, undulating canvas of the Pacific stretches, an endless blue, but to your ancestors, it was a living, breathing tapestry of clues. It's hard to imagine, isn't it? In our modern world, we look at the ocean as a mostly uniform expanse once you're out of sight of land. You track your progress with GPS, check your weather app, maybe glance at a sonar screen if you're fancy. But for these navigators, the ocean itself was the most complex instrument cluster you could ever hope for, especially what swam or drifted beneath your keel. And let's be honest, Missing one tiny clue, misinterpreting a flick of a fish tail or a subtle eddy in the current, well, that's how you become fish food yourself. You probably won't survive this. Just a friendly heads up from your narrator. Think of it. As you glide silently, perhaps the only sound the gentle lapping against the hulls, your eyes are constantly scanning, not just the horizon, not just the sky, but the water directly beneath and around you. It's an almost meditative state, where every ripple, every glint of silver, every shadow holds potential meaning. You're not just looking for fish to eat, though that's certainly a bonus on a long voyage. No, you're looking for specific fish, fish that don't wander aimlessly in the vast, open ocean. You're looking for the ones who have homes, who prefer the calm, nutrient-rich waters near a reef or the shelter of a lagoon. Imagine spotting a small school of brightly colored, iridescent reef fish, parrotfish, perhaps, or a flash of damselfish. These aren't creatures of the deep ocean, they're homebodies. Their presence, no matter how brief, screams land. In a language only a seasoned navigator could understand. It's almost like the fish were saying, "Psst, over here, free real estate." Or perhaps you see a sudden, frantic burst of activity on the surface, a feeding frenzy where tuna and mahi-mahi are driving smaller baitfish to the surface. While these pelagic predators roam wide, their consistent presence, especially if you're consistently encountering such abundant life, can hint at areas of upwelling or rich currents that often circulate around unseen islands, bringing nutrients to the surface. Mainstream historical fact alert. Polynesian navigators were renowned for their acute observations of marine life, relying on specific species and their behaviors as reliable indicators of proximity to land. They knew that certain fish, like the gray reef shark or various species of jacks, while found in open water, were also frequently associated with reef systems. Their feeding patterns, their directions of travel, all were meticulously noted. It was a live map, constantly updating itself before their eyes. Then there's the floating debris, nature's litter that becomes your treasure map. Not just any flotsam, mind you. You're not getting excited about a random piece of ancient fishing net or a discarded coconut husk from a passing canoe. Though I imagine more than one navigator cursed the day they followed a particularly convincing piece of driftwood that turned out to be just driftwood. You're searching for fresh water vegetation, leaves from plants that only grow on land, or even, most excitingly, a small, land-dwelling crab clinging to a piece of wood. A land crab in the middle of the Pacific. That's like a giant neon sign blinking, island ahead. And let's just say, some of these indicators, while accurate, probably didn't smell like a freshly baked croissant. You learn to embrace the aroma of ocean-born detritus. But the ocean itself, beyond its living inhabitants, offered perhaps the most subtle yet profound clues. The currents. You're not just feeling the general swell, which we talked about earlier, but the nuanced, intricate dance of water beneath your hull. The open ocean has its steady, predictable currents, like vast, unseen rivers flowing across the globe. But as these currents encounter a landmass, even 1 mile below the surface, they ripple, eddy, and deflect. Imagine a river flowing around a rock. The water doesn't just stop. It creates swirls and countercurrents. The ocean does the same thing, but on a grand scale. You'd feel a subtle change in the canoe's movement, a slight tug to the side, or an unexpected patch of calm water in an otherwise choppy sea. These shifts, almost imperceptible to the untrained observer, were like a secret handshake from the ocean, revealing the presence of a landmass disrupting the normal flow. You might even notice subtle temperature variations in the water. pockets of slightly warmer or cooler water caused by currents deflecting off an island landmass, a phenomenon some modern oceanographers call a thermal wake. This thermal signature could extend for miles, a ghostly outline of land before it ever rose into view. And visually, the currents paint stories. You might spot a line of debris, no more than a few scattered leaves and twigs, but forming a distinct convergence zone, where opposing currents meet and deposit their carried treasures. This often happens down current from an island. Or you might observe a slight, almost imperceptible shift in the water's color, not the dramatic change from deep blue to turquoise that signals a reef directly below, but a more diffuse haziness, a hint of suspended sediment carried off an unseen shore. You'd remember that unmistakable shift in the ocean's palette, from the deep, endless sapphire of the open sea to the brighter, almost emerald hue that whispers of shallower waters and hidden reefs. It's like the ocean whispering its secrets, just for you. Quirky tidbit. Some Polynesian navigators even claim to be able to detect the presence of islands by the minute sound variations in the water, listening for the altered gurgle of currents or the unique way waves broke against a distant, unseen shore. Whether this was truly auditory or a holistic interpretation of multiple subtle signs remains a fascinating point of discussion. The ability to read these minute signs, whether it was the direction a specific type of fish was swimming, the subtle pull of an eddy current, or the whisper of debris, was not something learned overnight. It was an apprenticeship spanning decades, a lifetime spent in intimate communion with the ocean. Every voyage added another layer of understanding, another data point to their mental charts. Historians still debate the exact hierarchy of these marine signs, questioning whether specific fish species were considered more reliable indicators than particular current patterns, or if it was always a holistic interpretation, a symphony of subtle cues that harmonized to point the way home. Regardless, the ocean, in its depths and its surface, was an open book to these ancient mariners, revealing its secrets to those patient enough and skilled enough to truly listen and observe. You feel the rough, cool bark of the freshly felled tree under your palm, its scent of earth and sap filling the humid air. Around you, the rhythmic thud of stone adzes biting into wood echoes through the clearing, a symphony of ancient craftsmanship. You're not just building a boat. You're sculpting a lifeline, a floating village that will carry you, your family, and your entire future across a liquid desert that dwarfs continents. This isn't some quick weekend DIY project, like assembling an IKEA bookshelf, where the worst that can happen is an extra screw and a wobbly result. No, this is existential engineering. The stakes are, shall we say, significantly higher. Get this wrong, and you probably won't survive this. You're gazing at the beginnings of what will become a vaca, the double-hulled canoe, a pinnacle of Polynesian ingenuity, and frankly, the unsung hero of exploration. Forget your modern superyachts with their plush interiors and satellite navigation. These vessels were truly marvels, designed not just to float, but to conquer the most expansive and unforgiving ocean on Earth. Imagine taking two colossal tree trunks, often breadfruit, tamanu, or even teak if you were lucky enough to find it. Each may be 70 feet long, sometimes even longer, and hollowing them out with tools made of stone, shell, or bone. This isn't just scooping out wood. It's a precise, symmetrical excavation, ensuring the hulls are balanced and buoyant. The sheer muscular effort involved, day after day, week after week, makes your gym routine look like a leisurely stroll through a garden center. Now picture connecting these two massive hulls. No nails, no screws, no industrial-strength adhesives, just natural fibers. Coir, specifically, made from coconut husks, painstakingly braided into ropes that are incredibly strong and surprisingly resistant to saltwater degradation. These ropes are lashed through meticulously drilled holes in the hulls and across the massive wooden beams, or yokes, that bridge the two main vessels. This lashing wasn't just decorative. It was engineered to flex, to absorb the tremendous forces of the ocean's swells you've come to know so intimately. It's a bit like a suspension bridge, but made entirely of organic materials, constantly moving, constantly adapting. Each knot is a testament to generations of accumulated knowledge, each lashing a prayer against the capricious whims of the Pacific. You watch the master builders, their hands moving with a fluid, almost meditative precision, teaching the younger generation the exact tension, the specific pattern of each wrap. It's like watching an ancient martial art, but with wood and rope instead of fists and feet. The design wasn't just about strength, it was about versatility. Double-hulled canoes offered unparalleled stability, which was crucial not only for holding a straight course, but also for accommodating significant payloads. We're talking hundreds of gallons of fresh water, root crops like taro and yams, livestock, chickens, pigs, even dogs, and of course a crew of dozens. There were shelters built on the main deck, sometimes even elevated platforms for better visibility and cooking hearths. It was a self-contained, mobile ecosystem, capable of supporting life for months at sea. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of some of the very largest vaca was exploration or establishing new settlements, given their immense carrying capacity. Some researchers suggest that the largest canoes, like the mythical Tahara of Tahiti, could have displaced hundreds of tons. But the real genius lay beneath the surface, in the subtle curves of the hulls and the placement of the mast. The hulls were not simple canoes lashed together. They were often asymmetrical. One hull, typically on the leeward side, would be slightly shorter or have a different shape, contributing to the vessel's ability to point closer to the wind, a critical advantage in long-distance sailing. This asymmetrical design, honed over centuries of trial and error, and likely a lot of error resulting in many lost crews, allowed these vessels to perform feats of upwind sailing that would astonish even modern sailors accustomed to high-tech keels and sails. It's a sophisticated aerodynamic and hydrodynamic dance, performed with nothing but carved wood and woven sails. Speaking of sails, they were usually triangular, crab-claw sails, woven from pandanus leaves. These weren't just pretty. They were incredibly efficient, capable of harnessing the power of the wind you remember so well, twisting and turning it into forward momentum. The mast itself wasn't rigidly fixed. Often it could be stepped and unstepped, allowing for flexibility and adjustment, even in the middle of a storm. And when the winds were too light, or you needed to maneuver in close quarters, you'd haul out the long, heavy paddles, sometimes 8 or 10 to a side, and the rhythmic dip and pull of human effort would propel you forward. Imagine the synchronized power, the collective breath, a testament to the community that built and now sails this vessel. One quirky tidbit about vaca construction involves certain ritualistic elements. Before felling a tree, master builders would often offer prayers or perform ceremonies, seeking permission from the forest spirits. And sometimes, after the canoe was completed, a small, preserved offering, perhaps a bird or a significant plant, might be placed within a hidden cavity of the hull, almost like a time capsule or a blessing for safe passage. It's a beautiful blend of practical engineering and spiritual reverence, acknowledging that while human hands did the work, forces beyond human comprehension also played a role. You stand on the deck of a newly completed vaca. The air is thick with the scent of fresh wood and the salty tang of the sea. The twin hulls, sleek and powerful, cut through the water, leaving a crisp wake behind you. You feel the subtle vibration of the lashings, hear the gentle creak of the deck underfoot. This isn't just a boat. It's a promise, an extension of your very will, a silent partner in your quest for new horizons. It's the ultimate expression of human ingenuity, built with an almost unthinkable level of effort and detail, using only what the islands provided. It feels sturdy, alive even, ready to dance with the swells and ride the winds that have become your constant companions. You gaze at the horizon, where the sun you use for your daily guides dips, preparing for the stars to emerge. The vaca beneath you is the ultimate tool to carry you through the rhythms of the ocean, and closer to the land, hinted at by the clouds and the birds. You feel the grit of fine coral dust beneath your bare feet, the early morning sun already warm on your skin as you stand, back ramrod straight, before the stern gaze of the master navigator. This isn't your average online course. There are no participation trophies, and frankly, if you don't get this right, you probably won't survive the next trip beyond the reef. Welcome to the Wayfinding Academy, or rather, the relentless, unforgiving, often spiritual apprenticeship that forged the greatest navigators the world has ever known. Here, knowledge isn't scribbled in textbooks. It's etched into your very being. From the moment the sun dips below the horizon, your world shrinks to the shimmering tapestry of the night sky. You're expected to not just identify Polaris, which, let's be honest, is practically a cheat code for Northern Hemisphere navigation and completely useless down here, but to know every major star, every constellation, and their precise rising and setting points throughout the year. Imagine trying to memorize every single Wi-Fi password you've ever used, then multiplying that by, roughly 1 million, and now imagine your survival depends on it. That's essentially your nightly homework. You chart their paths in your mind, visualizing their arcs as they wheel across the celestial dome. A cosmic clock that tells you not just time, but direction, latitude, and even the season. It's a mental map so intricate, so vast, it makes your phone's GPS look like a crayon drawing. Remember how we talked about the subtle language of the ocean's swells? Here, you don't just talk to them. You become fluent, capable of distinguishing every nuance, every long-distance pulse that traveled thousands of miles, even the ones you'd swear were just the ocean clearing its throat. You spend hours, days, perhaps even weeks, sitting on the beach, or better yet, out in a small canoe, blindfolded, learning to discern the primary swells from the secondary, the reflected waves from the refracted. You feel the canoe's every rock and roll, translating each subtle shift into a direction, a location, an almost preternatural awareness of invisible landmasses beyond the horizon. It's like learning to read Braille with your entire body, and the text is the restless surface of an entire ocean. It's a sensory overload that somehow becomes a symphony of information, a language spoken by the very planet itself. The masters, known by various titles depending on the island group, like the PWO in the Caroline Islands, a revered designation for master navigators, don't just lecture. They demonstrate, they question, they push. They might take you out in the dead of night, drop you off miles from shore, and tell you to find your way back using only the feel of the swells and the stars you've come to know as intimately as your own breath. You learn to interpret the seemingly chaotic surface of the ocean, finding the underlying patterns, the whispers of distant islands carried by the wave reflections. It's a skill that transcends mere intellectual understanding. It becomes a part of your muscle memory, your very intuition. And then there are the birds. Oh, the birds. You've heard about them, of course, the trusty avian land detectors. But in the academy, you don't just learn that birds signify land. You learn which birds, when they fly, and how they fly. You learn the precise flight paths of terns and noddies, the specific species that roost on land but feed at sea, and the exact time they leave their nests in the morning and return at dusk. You're taught to observe the slight deviation in their flight as they spot land, the subtle change in their call. It's ornithology meets advanced reconnaissance, all without a pair of binoculars. You spend hours squinting at the horizon, waiting for that telltale speck, that flicker of movement that could mean the difference between fresh water and thirst, between life and a slow, agonizing drift into oblivion. Even the clouds, those fluffy sky paintings we often ignore, become crucial indicators. You're drilled on how to differentiate between the towering cumulus clouds formed over distant islands, often with a flat base and distinct land cap appearance, and the more random, shapeless clouds of the open ocean. You learn to spot the faint green tint on the underside of a cloud reflecting the lagoon below, a visual trick that's both beautiful and incredibly precise. It's meteorology without the fancy Doppler radar, relying instead on keen observation and generations of accumulated wisdom. The training extends beyond the natural world, encompassing the spiritual and the communal. You learn the sacred chants and prayers, the ancient stories that weave navigational knowledge with myth and history. These narratives aren't just bedtime stories. They're mnemonic devices, complex poems that encode star courses, swell patterns, and the locations of islands. It's said that some navigators could recite entire genealogies of islands, each name a waypoint, each story a chapter in their oceanic saga. Historians still argue whether these academies were formalized institutions with physical buildings and strict curricula, or more fluid, decentralized master-apprentice relationships that unfolded organically over years, perhaps even decades, on a single canoe or within a small island community. What's clear is that the transmission of this knowledge was deliberate, rigorous, and absolutely essential for the survival and expansion of Polynesian civilization. It wasn't just about accumulating facts. It was about transforming your perception of reality. You learn to trust your instincts, to feel the pulse of the ocean through the very hull of your vaca. The master might challenge you with seemingly impossible tasks, like sailing a small canoe without a paddle or steering oar, forcing you to rely solely on your body's connection to the wind and swell. You learn to read the sun's arc with an accuracy that would impress a Swiss watchmaker, discerning subtle shifts in its position to determine your latitude. And let's not forget the marine life. You identify specific fish species that frequent atolls, or the subtle shimmer of bioluminescence in the water indicating a certain current. It's a deep dive into an ecosystem you are intimately a part of, not merely observing. By the end of your training, the ocean isn't a terrifying expanse of water. It's a living, breathing entity, and you are fluent in its language, a part of its intricate, vast, and utterly captivating story. You push past the gentle sway of the canoe, the rhythmic creak of the lashings, and close your eyes. In the vast, inky blackness behind your eyelids, a different world unfolds, not the limitless ocean stretching before you, but a meticulously constructed, shimmering network of pathways. This isn't just imagination. It's your internal chart, the living, breathing mental map that truly guides you. Every swell, every star, every cloud formation isn't merely observed. It's immediately cataloged, cross-referenced, and woven into an intricate tapestry of knowledge. You are the human equivalent of a supercomputer, processing terabytes of environmental data in real time, all without a single screen or microchip. Pretty cool, right? But also, if your internal hard drive crashes out here, if you lose even one critical bit of this oceanic data, well, you probably won't survive this. This isn't about rote memorization. It's about deep, intuitive understanding forged from years of observation and experiential learning. Imagine taking every single piece of information you've ever absorbed about the natural world. The subtle shift in wind direction as it passes over an island, the precise angle of the sun at midday in a particular season, the specific flight path of a frigate bird returning to its nesting grounds, and storing it not as isolated facts, but as interconnected nodes in a vast neural network. Your ancestors, the navigators, achieved this. They possessed a cognitive architecture that allowed them to internalize the entire Pacific, transforming it from an intimidating expanse into a series of known, predictable relationships. One of the most profound cognitive strategies they employed was the star compass, not a physical tool you held in your hand, but an internal mental construct. Imagine a circle around the horizon, divided into 32 equidistant points, each corresponding to where a specific star or constellation would rise and set. This mental framework provided an unwavering directional reference, anchoring all other observations. When you learned a new island's bearing, you didn't note east-northeast. You noted where the Pleiades rise. This isn't merely a quaint way of naming directions. It's a dynamic, living compass that shifts with the night sky, yet remains constant in its internal logic. You train your mind to see the entire celestial sphere rotating around you, and each rising or setting point becomes a fixed, reliable marker. But the star compass was just one layer. Beneath it lay the deep memory of ocean swells. Remember how we talked about the subtle, underlying pulse of the ocean. You didn't just feel those swells. You remembered their origin, their interaction with distant landmasses, and their unique characteristics. This formed another layer of your mental map, a kind of tactile GPS system. You could feel a swell refracting off an island thousands of miles away, long before that island ever peeked over the horizon. Your brain was constantly cross-referencing these swell patterns with wind directions, current flows, and even the subtle taste of the salt spray, building a comprehensive, multi-sensory picture of your exact location and trajectory. It's like your entire body became a highly sensitive instrument panel, feeding data into your vast internal processing unit. The memory techniques used to store this colossal amount of data were ingenious. Much of it was passed down through oral traditions, woven into epic chants, poems, and riddles. Imagine trying to memorize an encyclopedia, but instead of pages, it's all in your head, sung in a melodic rhythm that also teaches you how to sail. These weren't just catchy tunes. They were mnemonic devices, each verse packed with navigational data. Where the black-backed tern flies west at dawn lies the reef of the white sands, 3 days on a northerly wind. A line might go, encoding direction, time, and specific environmental cues. It's a bit like trying to remember your Wi-Fi password, but your life, and the lives of everyone on board, depends on getting it right every single time. And no, you can't just write it on the back of your hand. Historians still argue whether the exact star compass model as popularized later by modern scholars like Maupiilug, was a universal, formalized system across all Polynesian cultures, or if it varied significantly between island groups, adapting to local stars and traditions. It's certainly a question that keeps a lot of very smart people up at night, unlike you, who should be getting quite sleepy right about now. What is clear, however, is the profound cognitive architecture that allowed these navigators to internalize and utilize such vast, complex, and dynamic data sets. They might not have had supercomputers, but they certainly had super brains. One quirky tidbit about their learning methods often overlooked is the practice of dream journeys. Young navigators would sometimes be encouraged to mentally rehearse voyages while in a dreamlike state, visualizing every step of the journey, every star, every wave, integrating it into their subconscious understanding. It's a bit like lucid dreaming for navigational mastery. Imagine preparing for your driving test by dreaming about it every night. Except, with significantly higher stakes. These practices speak to a holistic approach to knowledge, where the mind, body, and spirit were all engaged in the pursuit of mastery. Your ability to recall specific bird behaviors, the way a certain species circles before heading home, or the telltale splash of another diving for fish in a distant shoal, isn't just a memory. It's a finely tuned predictive model. With uncanny accuracy, what these subtle signs mean. And all of this, every current, every cloud, every shadow, every historical success and failure is mapped within your mind. It's an ever-evolving, three-dimensional mental representation of the ocean, stretching out around you, a map that you are constantly updating with every breath of wind and every sway of the hull. This isn't merely wayfinding. It's an exquisite, cognitive ballet performed on the grandest stage of all. You close your eyes, the fire's warmth flickering against your eyelids, the scent of taro and sea salt lingering. You're not scrolling a digital map. Your chart is the collective memory of your ancestors, woven into your culture. You sit cross-legged in a dimly lit fail, the low murmur of voices a hypnotic rhythm. An elder, his face a roadmap of wisdom, begins to hum. It's not just a tune. It's a living, breathing blueprint of the ocean highway, etched not on parchment, but into the intricate pathways of the human mind. This is where the canoe meets the boundless ocean, because without these meticulously preserved oral traditions, those incredible mental maps we discussed earlier would simply vanish. Imagine navigating thousands of miles across an empty ocean, remembering every star, swell, and bird migration, without a single written note. It's like recreating the entire internet from memory, starting with the very first cat video. You probably won't survive this, by the way, if your memory's like mine after a long Tuesday. One forgotten line in a chant, one misremembered detail about a specific current, and you're not just lost, let's just say your next meal is going to be incredibly salty and very, very lonely. These ancient Polynesians, masters of mnemonic magic, understood that knowledge was power, and its preservation was paramount. They devised systems so ingenious, so deeply embedded in their daily lives, that the very act of living became an act of learning. Chants, songs, and stories weren't just for entertainment around the fire. They were encyclopedias, atlases, and survival guides, all rolled into one melodic package. You'd learn the names of hundreds of stars, not in isolation, but as part of a story, a journey, a sequence of interconnected points that formed a celestial grid. The paths of the sun and moon, the rhythmic dance of ocean swells, the subtle shifts in wind direction, all codified, all remembered. Consider the cumulipo, a vast Hawaiian creation chant. While not solely a navigational text, it demonstrates the sheer capacity of these oral traditions. This epic poem, over 2,000 lines long, recounts the genealogy of the Hawaiian people from the very beginning of time, linking them to gods, to nature, and to the specific islands they inhabit. Embedded within such narratives, often subtly, were geographical markers, directional cues, and astronomical observations. It was like a giant, cosmic GPS that also happened to tell you who your great-great-great-great-grandpappy was. And unlike your modern GPS, this one never ran out of battery or told you to turn right into a swamp. These weren't just rote recitations either. Imagine a Polynesian Navigation Academy, and they absolutely had them, albeit sans chalkboards and PowerPoint. You, as an aspiring navigator, wouldn't just be told about the islands. You'd sing their names, learn songs that described their unique bird populations, chants that mimicked the specific wave patterns that broke against their shores. You'd hear stories of ancient voyages, not just tales of heroism, but detailed accounts of the conditions encountered, the stars followed, the duration of the journey. It was immersion learning on a whole new level. No online tutorials, no multiple-choice quizzes, just the raw, unfiltered wisdom of generations echoing in your ears. One quirky tidbit about this system involves the concept of tilapa, or flashing in some traditions, particularly from the Solomon Islands. While not strictly oral lore, the knowledge of how to interpret these subtle underwater light flashes, caused by bioluminescent organisms disturbed by specific wave patterns, was passed down orally. Imagine navigating by faint flickers in the dark depths. It's like finding your way home by interpreting the Morse code of plankton. Right, that's 2 short flashes, 1 long. Must be the turnoff for the taro patch. The structure of these chants often used repetition, rhythm, and rhyme to aid memorization, much like a catchy pop song that gets stuck in your head for days. Except instead of singing about questionable life choices, you're singing about how to get to Rarotonga without accidentally ending up in Antarctica. These weren't static texts, they were dynamic. Stories would evolve, new details might be added, but the core navigational data, the truth of the route, remained surprisingly consistent, meticulously checked and verified by elder navigators. It's a testament to the human mind's ability to process and retain complex spatial information when motivated by, not dying. Historians still argue whether certain mythological elements within these chants, particularly the journeys of gods and demigods like Maui, were purely metaphorical or contained hidden, literal navigational instructions. Did Maui's fishing up of islands, for example, subtly encode the discovery routes of previously unknown landmasses? Was the journey to the underworld a veiled description of deep ocean currents? It's a fascinating thought, turning ancient epic poems into cryptographic puzzles for future generations. If so, those ancient poets were truly next level. Forget your treasure maps with X marks the spot. These were treasure poems where a metaphor marks the archipelago. The oral transmission of this knowledge also meant that a navigator wasn't just a pilot. They were a living library, a repository of thousands of years of accumulated wisdom. This wasn't just about knowing where to go, but when to go, how to prepare, what to expect. They carried in their minds intricate calendars of seasonal winds, detailed knowledge of fish migrations, and comprehensive lists of flora and fauna found on specific islands. It's why the training was so rigorous, often beginning in childhood. You couldn't just Google best way to Fiji. You had to be the Google, This system of oral lore created a profoundly interconnected society, where knowledge was shared and reinforced through communal storytelling and ritual. Think of it, every time a story was told, every time a chant was sung, the entire community was, in a sense, reaffirming and reinforcing the collective navigational memory. It wasn't just one person's burden. It was a shared inheritance. And unlike that time you tried to teach your grandpa how to use a smartphone, this knowledge transfer system actually worked flawlessly for millennia. So as the elder's voice softly fades into the night, you feel the weight of this legacy. You understand that the charts of the Pacific weren't lines on paper. They were living narratives, sung into existence, spoken into being, and remembered into survival. You carry them, not in your backpack, but in the very pathways of your mind, ready to unfold them when the stars appear, and the ocean calls you home. It's a profound connection to a past where memory was currency, and stories were the very threads that stitched islands together across an immeasurable blue expanse. The rhythmic sloshing of water against the Vaca's hull has become the soundtrack to your life. The sun, a relentless painter, sketches new shades of bronze onto your skin each day. You feel the constant tremor of the ocean beneath you, a living, breathing entity that dictates everything. But right now, you're not thinking about the stars you tracked last night, nor the subtle changes in the swells beneath your feet. Your mind, your very being, is focused on something far more immediate, far more primal. The persistent, gnawing emptiness in your stomach. This, my friend, is where the rubber meets the road, or more accurately, where the provisions meet the reality of weeks, sometimes months, adrift on a vast, indifferent blue. You're learning firsthand that celestial navigation is all well and good, but without something to eat and drink, you're just a very observant, very thirsty ghost. You gaze around the crowded deck, past the huddled forms of your crewmates, at the precious cargo lashed securely. These aren't just supplies, they're the fragile tether to survival. Imagine, for a moment, packing for a camping trip that might last a year, with no convenient store stops, no resupply drones, and absolutely zero chance of a pizza delivery. That's the Polynesian Provision Challenge, magnified 1,000 times. The ingenuity is truly mind-boggling. They weren't just packing food. They were packing an entire, self-sustaining ecosystem on a floating timber raft. Your most immediate concern, of course, is water. You feel the dry rasp in your throat, a constant reminder of how quickly dehydration can set in under the tropical sun. Polynesians were masters of water management. They meticulously collected rainwater using large, funnel-shaped sails and woven mats, directing every precious drop into hollowed-out gourds and bamboo containers. But even more crucially, they relied heavily on a living water source, the coconut. Stacked in pyramids, their husks provided insulation, keeping the precious fluid inside cool and relatively fresh for weeks. Crack one open, and the sweet, slightly nutty liquid is a momentary balm, a taste of home in the endless expanse. It's not quite as refreshing as a cold soda after a long hike, but trust me, after a few weeks at sea, it tastes like nectar from the gods. Then there's the food. You probably imagine barrels of salted beef like old pirate movies, but the Polynesian pantry was far more sophisticated and, frankly, much healthier. Staples like taro, yams, and breadfruit, high in carbohydrates, were carefully processed and preserved. Taro, or kalo as it's often called, was a cornerstone. It could be cooked, dried, and then pounded into a storable, nutrient-dense paste called payai. This stuff, while perhaps not winning any culinary awards for presentation, was incredibly versatile and lasted for extended periods. Think of it as the original power bar, but with a slightly earthy, fermented tang. They'd also ferment breadfruit into a similar paste, mahi, which could last for months, if not years, in sealed containers. The fermentation process not only preserved the food, but also enhanced its nutritional value, breaking down complex starches and making them more digestible. It's a remarkable example of biopreservation, long before anyone understood the microbiology of it all. Protein came from a variety of sources. Dried fish, naturally, was paramount. Fish caught at sea were immediately cleaned, salted if possible, and then sun-dried on deck, becoming brittle, savory jerky. Imagine trying to keep flies off of it while at sea. That's a unique challenge you probably hadn't considered. They also carried live animals. Chickens, pigs, and even dogs, not as pets, mind you, but as a food source. These animals, though small, provided fresh meat and eggs, a crucial psychological boost, and a source of protein that didn't rely on fishing luck. You learn quickly to appreciate the calming cluck of a chicken on deck, not just for its potential breakfast, but for the mere fact that something else living besides humans is sharing your floating world. It's a little grim, perhaps, but hey, you probably won't survive this journey if you're too squeamish about your dinner. Beyond the major provisions, every inch of space was utilized for other vital supplies. Medicinal plants, carefully dried and bundled, were carried for ailments and injuries. Fibers for repair, extra cordage, tools, fishing gear, all had their designated, meticulously organized spots. They even carried small plant cuttings and seeds from their home islands, not just for food, but for the fundamental purpose of transplanting their entire way of life to new lands once found. This practice, known as biological colonization, was central to their expansion. One quirky tidbit about their provisioning methods that often gets overlooked is the use of noni fruit. While mostly known today for its purported health benefits and rather pungent smell, its leaves and fruit were used extensively for medicinal purposes on voyages. It was practically the floating pharmacy. And if you're wondering what it smells like, well, imagine really, really ripe blue cheese crossed with a gym sock. You get used to it, or you just hold your breath. Historians still argue whether the Polynesians specifically cultivated certain quick-growing, hardy crops, like certain varieties of sweet potato, precisely for their ability to thrive with minimal water and soil on these long voyages, or if it was simply a happy coincidence. The sheer foresight involved in selecting and cultivating specific plants and animals, not just for their immediate sustenance, but for their viability in new environments, speaks volumes about their long-term planning and deep understanding of ecological systems. As you drift through the endless blue, the reality of these provisions hits you. Every preserved root, every dried fish, every sip of coconut water is a testament to generations of accumulated knowledge, to a profound respect for resources, and to an unshakable belief that somewhere beyond the horizon lay a new home where these carefully carried seeds would sprout and flourish. It's not just about surviving. It's about thriving, about carrying life itself across the largest ocean on Earth. Your provisions, meticulously rationed, are dwindling, but you've made it this far, pushing through the monotony of the open ocean. Remember that ingenious taro paste, mixed with coconut cream. Yeah, it's probably tasting like pure nostalgia by now, a distant memory of fresh flavors. But as the days stretch into weeks, and the blue expanse seems endless, a new sensation begins to stir. It's not a sound, not a sight, not even a feeling on your skin, but something far more primal. It's a whisper on the wind, a ghost of a scent. You're leaning over the Vaca's hull, perhaps trying to spot one of those helpful deep-diving tuna you hoped would lead you to an atoll, when it hits you. A faint, almost imperceptible earthiness. It's not the salty tang of the ocean, nor the stale smell of the hull, nor the lingering aroma of the last dried fish you ate. This is different. It's the smell of damp soil, of lush, living vegetation. Imagine catching the faint scent of a rainforest after weeks in a desert. It's exactly that kind of revelatory, almost tear-inducing aroma. Polynesian navigators, with senses honed to an impossible degree, could detect the scent of land from surprisingly vast distances. We're talking perhaps dozens, even 100 miles out, depending on the wind and the size of the island. It's not a sudden, overwhelming perfume, but a subtle, building presence. At first, it might be the general aroma of plant life, then perhaps a specific flower, or the decay of fallen leaves. On a small atoll, it might be the distinctive smell of guano from seabirds, or the sweet, fermented scent of pandanus fruit. On a larger, volcanic island, it's the rich, organic perfume of a thriving ecosystem. This isn't some romanticized notion. It's a mainstream historical fact, documented through oral traditions and reinforced by modern experiments in sensory perception. Think of it as the ultimate olfactory navigation system, far more reliable than your fancy GPS, which, let's be honest, would probably drown the moment you got a splash of salt water on it. And then there's the water itself. For weeks, you've been riding the open ocean swells, those deep, consistent pulses that travel thousands of miles. Remember how we talked about them, the deep memory of the ocean's rhythms imprinted on your mind. Well, as you near land, something subtle but significant changes. The long, majestic ocean swells start to meet an invisible barrier, the island. They refract, bend, and reflect off the landmass, creating new, intersecting wave patterns. It's like throwing a pebble into a still pond and watching the ripples. Now imagine those ripples hitting a submerged rock, and the pattern subtly shifts. A master navigator wouldn't just feel one swell, but the interplay of multiple swells, discerning the direction from which new, reflected waves were coming. These reflected waves, bouncing off the hidden shores, would tell them the precise bearing of the island, even if it was still well below the horizon. It's a bit like sonar, but with water, and without any of the cool beeping noises. You might also notice the color of the water changing. No longer that deep, inky, almost alien blue of the open ocean. Closer to land, especially near coral reefs or shallow lagoons, the water takes on a lighter, more vibrant turquoise or emerald hue. Suspended particles, often microscopic, carried by currents flowing off the island, can also give the water a slightly milky or cloudy appearance, a subtle hint that the currents have interacted with land. It's like your bathtub water after a particularly muddy walk, but much prettier. Then there are the clouds. We've mentioned them before, those fluffy cartographers of the sky. But closer to land, especially volcanic islands, you'll notice a distinct phenomenon: land-based clouds. As warm, moist air from the ocean meets the rising terrain of an island, it's forced upwards, cools, and condenses, forming localized cloud caps or stationary clouds over the island. These clouds, often brighter and whiter than the surrounding sky, stand out against the deeper blue, acting as a visual beacon, a lighthouse in the sky long before the land itself appears. Sometimes you might even spot what looks like a faint, shimmering halo, almost like a mirage, hovering above the horizon, a phenomenon known as loom, where light is refracted through cooler air above the land, making the island appear to float. Historians still argue whether the detection of these specific cloud formations, or the subtle changes in swell patterns, was the primary indicator for navigators making long-distance landfalls. Both were undoubtedly crucial, but which provided the earliest, most reliable sign? The debate sails on, and if you're lucky, you'll start seeing debris. Not just random flotsam, but specific, telltale signs of terrestrial life. A fresh green leaf, still vibrant. A small, waterlogged branch, perhaps even with a flower attached. Coconuts, remarkably buoyant, drift for weeks and are a welcome sight. Even a tiny piece of pumice, a volcanic rock light enough to float, could indicate a volcanic island nearby. These aren't just random bits. They're messengers, little postcards from the land, carried by currents, confirming what your nose and the ocean swells have already hinted at. Finally, the birds. Oh, the birds. We talked about them as flying land detectors, but now the stakes are higher. You're not just seeing the wide-ranging oceanic birds anymore. You're starting to spot species that need to return to land daily. Terns, boobies, frigate birds, they head out to fish in the morning and return to their nesting sites on land in the evening. Observing their flight patterns, you'd see them heading in a particular direction at dusk and returning from that same direction at dawn. Follow them. They know. It's like having feathered aerial drones guiding you home, except these ones sometimes poop on your head. The air itself seems to feel different. Perhaps a slight decrease in wind speed as the land provides a windbreak, or a subtle shift in the wind's direction as it funnels around island terrain. You might even notice dew forming on the deck of your vodka in the mornings, something that wouldn't happen in the dry, constant winds of the open ocean. It's a tiny, almost imperceptible detail, but to a navigator on the edge of survival, every single detail is a clue. This incredible sensitivity to the environment is why, without modern instruments, these voyagers achieved feats of exploration that still baffle us. It's a reminder that sometimes, your most advanced technology is simply your own finely tuned senses. Honestly, put a modern person out here with nothing but their phone and a sense of optimism, and you probably won't survive this. But these navigators, well, they were built different. They knew how to read the world like a book, and right now that book is whispering, "Welcome home." You're out there, just you and the boundless blue, after days, weeks even, of seeing nothing but the relentless curve of the horizon. The thrill of the chase has given way to a gnawing doubt. This isn't just a big ocean. It's a cosmic joke designed to swallow you whole. How do you find a needle in this watery haystack, especially when the needle itself is just a speck, perhaps a tiny green jewel in a vast, indifferent blue? This is where your ancient navigator ancestors, bless their clever souls, unveiled a strategy so elegant, so deceptively simple. It makes you wonder if they secretly had GPS, or at least a very good intern with a very large map. Because you probably won't survive this if you just sail in a straight line, hoping to bump into an island. That's a fool's errand, practically a self-fulfilling prophecy of becoming fish food. Instead, you learn the art of the expanding target strategy. Imagine you've sailed for what feels like an eternity, aiming for a point on your mental map. You know, give or take a few degrees for drift and the occasional existential crisis, that the island should be somewhere within a certain general area. But an island isn't a billboard, it's a shy little thing easily missed. So you don't just sail straight. That's like trying to find your car keys in the dark by walking only in a straight line from the door. You need a better sweep. The core idea is to systematically widen your search pattern. You reach the approximate latitude of your target, and then you begin to tack, or sail back and forth across a broad area, effectively creating a massive, expanding fan or cone. Think of it like a human-powered, oceanic lawnmower. You sail maybe 30 miles due east from your calculated position. Then you turn and sail maybe 60 miles due west. Then you turn and sail east again, slightly further north or south than your last eastbound leg. Each leg of this zigzag pattern ensures you're covering new water, systematically expanding your probability of intersecting with that elusive landmass. It's methodical, it's painstaking, and it's brilliant. Your success hinges on this diligent, almost robotic coverage of the sea. This isn't just about random wandering, though. Every shift in direction, every turn of the canoe is informed by the myriad signs you've been diligently observing. Remember those ocean swells, the deep, persistent rhythms of the ocean from Section 5. They are your invisible pathways, refracting and bending around distant landmasses, creating subtle shifts in their pattern. As you sweep back and forth, you're not just looking. You're feeling the canoe, interpreting every subtle change in the swell direction and amplitude. A cross swell appearing from a consistent direction could be the whisper of an island, a hint that you're within its wave shadow, even if it's still far beyond the horizon. It's like hearing a faint echo in a canyon. You know there's a wall out there, even if you can't see it. And the birds, your feathered scouts from Section 8. As you execute your expanding target sweep, you pay obsessive attention to their flights. Do they fly out in the morning in a specific direction and return in the evening? That path points to land. Are they a species that doesn't stray far from shore, like terns or boobies? Their presence, especially in increasing numbers, is a biological breadcrumb trail. You're not just seeing birds, you're seeing arrows pointing the way. Modern-day pilots searching for downed aircraft often use similar expanding square or parallel track patterns. Turns out, ancient Polynesians were doing the same thing, just with less caffeine and more spiritual reverence for their methodology. Then there are the clouds, those silent sky readers, from Section 7. The island effect on cloud formations is a major clue. Islands, especially tall ones, create their own weather patterns, causing updrafts that lead to distinct, often stationary, cloud formations. These land clouds can be seen from immense distances, towering over the general haze of the ocean. As you sweep your search pattern, you're constantly scanning the horizon, not just for the faint outline of land, but for the subtle, telltale bulge of a cloud that doesn't quite fit. It's like noticing a peculiar smudge on a masterpiece. It might be a mistake, or it might be the key to understanding the whole thing. A mainstream historical fact is that this systematic method of exploration by fanning out from a known point or a calculated area of likely land was a cornerstone of Polynesian expansion across the Pacific. It wasn't just a happy accident. It was a deliberate, taught strategy. A quirky tidbit, however, is that some theories suggest they might have even used pre-sighting, voyages quick, daring trips to confirm a target's existence before a full migration, creating mental anchors for later, larger-scale search patterns. Imagine just zipping out there, taking a peek, and then heading back just to confirm you're not sailing into oblivion. Talk about dedication. Historians still debate the extent to which these patterns were rigid, predetermined courses, or more fluid, adaptive responses to signs observed during the journey. Was there a master plan laid out on a mental grid? Or was it a continuous, intuitive adjustment based on every flicker of a cloud, every subtle shift of a swell? The truth is likely a blend of both, a testament to the navigators' incredible mental agility and their deep, intimate connection with their environment. This comprehensive approach, combining the systematic search pattern with the interpretation of every available sign. The smells carried on the wind. Remember that whiff of rich, damp earth from section 15. The subtle changes in ocean color due to shallows. The unique behavior of marine life from section 9 near an island creates what's sometimes called the island halo. It's a sphere of influence, an expanding bubble of clues that reaches out far beyond the visible landmass. Your job as the navigator is to patiently, methodically, and with every ounce of your accumulated knowledge, sweep through this halo until the whispers turn into shouts, and the faint outlines become solid land. It's a testament to patience, skill, and an unwavering belief that somewhere out there, a new home awaits. You've mastered the expanding target strategy, meticulously sweeping the horizon, hoping for that telltale cloud or the subtle scent of distant land. But even with all those clever tricks, you're still talking about finding islands already known to exist, or at least suspected. Now imagine being the very first to push into the truly unknown, into waters where no human eye had ever seen land. You're not just finding an island, you're discovering a whole new world. And let me tell you, without the benefit of, say, Google Maps or even a rudimentary compass, you probably won't survive this. Most didn't. This is where we step back, way back to the original pioneers, the true pathfinders who laid the groundwork for all the incredible voyages we've been tracking. The Lapita people. Think of them as the OG deep ocean explorers, the ones who decided that the horizon wasn't a limit but an invitation. Their story isn't just one of daring voyages. It's written in the mud, fired in kilns, and scattered across thousands of miles of ocean. Their most enduring legacy, their archaeological footprint, is literally made of pots. Yes, pottery. Not quite as glamorous as a massive double-hulled canoe, perhaps, but infinitely more durable and revealing. Imagine archaeologists, centuries from now, trying to piece together our society from just a collection of ceramic mugs. It sounds a bit silly, but for the Lapita, their distinctive pottery is the breadcrumb trail that stretches across the vast Pacific, charting their remarkable expansion. You're standing on a beach, perhaps in Vanuatu or Fiji, feeling the coarse sand between your toes, the warm sun on your skin. Below your feet, just a few inches down, might lie a shard of Lapita pottery. It's not just any old broken pot. It's a masterclass in ancient artistry. These aren't crude, utilitarian vessels. We're talking about finely made, thin-walled earthenware, often reddish-brown, decorated with intricate geometric patterns. The designs weren't just scratched on. They were stamped into the wet clay using small, toothed tools like a tiny comb or a shell. This technique, called dentate stamping, creates a series of dots, dashes, and spirals, often filled with white lime after firing, making the patterns truly pop against the darker clay. It's the kind of meticulous detail that suggests these pots weren't just for cooking. They were statements, maybe even heirlooms. And everywhere the Lapita went, their pottery went with them. From the Bismarck Archipelago, off the coast of Papua New Guinea, around 3,500 years ago, you trace their path eastward. It's like following a trail of brightly patterned breadcrumbs across the largest ocean on Earth. You see their distinct pottery emerge in New Caledonia, then Vanuatu, then Fiji, stretching all the way to Tonga and Samoa around 2,800 years ago. This wasn't a slow crawl either. This was a relatively rapid expansion, a burst of movement across thousands of miles of open ocean. Think about that for a second. In a matter of a few centuries, These people, with no metal tools, no written language, and certainly no GPS, colonized an area of the planet larger than Europe. Your average house move across town feels like an epic saga, right? These folks were relocating entire cultures across entire oceans. This incredible spread of Lapita pottery represents the first truly long-distance voyaging into the remote Pacific. Before them, human settlement had largely hugged the continents and larger, more visible islands of Southeast Asia and near Oceania. The Lapita, however, had the canoes, the courage, and critically, the navigational know-how. Even if it was a nascent form compared to the later Polynesian master navigators we've discussed, they were clearly on the right track. Remember those swell patterns and star compasses? They were probably figuring it out as they went, adapting ancient skills to unprecedented distances. This makes the mainstream historical fact of their widespread and identifiable pottery a cornerstone of understanding Pacific migration. It's undeniable, it's tangible, and it whispers tales of ancient wanderings. One quirky tidbit about their pottery. Some shards found have incredibly intricate human or animal faces incorporated into the patterns, almost like tiny, stylized masks looking back at you from a bygone era. Imagine pulling one of these out of the earth. It's not just an artifact. It's a greeting from 3,000 years ago, a silent testament to artistic expression and perhaps even spiritual beliefs etched into clay. You can almost feel the touch of the artisan's fingers as they press the tool into the wet clay. It makes you wonder what kind of stories or myths those faces represented. Were they gods, ancestors, pet parrots? The archaeological record, unfortunately, is quite tight-lipped on the specifics of their ancient ceramic mythology. The very concept of a rapid, intentional expansion by the Lapita challenges earlier notions that Pacific islands were settled through accidental drift voyages. While some unintentional landfalls undoubtedly happened, the consistent presence of Lapita pottery across such a vast area, combined with evidence of transported plants and animals, like pigs, chickens, and various crops, points to purposeful, well-organized expeditions. They weren't just hoping for the best. They were planning for it. Historians still argue whether the primary motivation for this astounding expansion was resource scarcity, population pressure, a desire for adventure, or perhaps some combination of all these factors. Was it a planned exodus, or a series of desperate searches for new homes? The pottery doesn't tell us why they moved, only that they moved, and with remarkable efficiency. When you look at a map, it's easy to see dots and lines, but the reality for the Lapita was unimaginably vast stretches of empty ocean. Imagine setting sail from an island you'd called home your entire life, pushing into an empty horizon, carrying everything you own, including the raw clay for your distinct pots, and knowing that if you don't find land, that's it. Game over. Your entire lineage ends with a splash. This wasn't some casual vacation cruise. This was an existential gamble, a bold declaration of intent against the immense indifference of the ocean. The ability to carry their cultural markers, like their pottery, so consistently across these distances speaks volumes about their confidence and skill. They didn't just make pots. They made history, one stamped pattern at a time. Imagine you're adrift. The sun beats down, a relentless eye in the sky. Your vodka, remember that marvel of engineering, feels tiny, a mere speck on the vast, indifferent blue. You've scanned the horizon for days, relying on those subtle signs we discussed. The specific rhythm of the swells, the faintest scent of land on the breeze, the distant scatter of a frigate bird. But what if those signs never come? What if the storm that hit 3 weeks ago, a rogue squall that came out of nowhere, didn't just push you slightly off course, but sent you spiraling into the truly unknown? Here's where the scholarly whispers begin, a fascinating, sometimes heated debate that echoes across the decades. Were these epic Polynesian journeys, these unparalleled feats of exploration, acts of deliberate, calculated genius, or were they, at least some of them, simply accidents? Were these navigators, the ones we've been admiring, just incredibly lucky castaways who stumbled upon paradise, only to repeat the trick through sheer, improbable chance? You probably won't survive this if it's accidental, by the way. Most accidental drifts end in tragedy, not triumph. Historians and archaeologists still vigorously debate whether the initial dispersal across the Pacific was primarily driven by deliberate, two-way voyaging, or if a significant portion involved one-way, accidental drift followed by a subsequent development of advanced navigation for return journeys. Now let's consider the accidental drift argument. It's compelling in its deceptive simplicity, isn't it? A fishing canoe caught in a sudden squall, swept far from its home atoll. A family fleeing conflict, poorly equipped, trusting to fate and the currents. On the surface, it sounds plausible, especially given the sheer unpredictability of the ocean. Imagine yourself on such a vessel, stripped of your mental maps and your celestial compass. The consistent rhythm of the swells, that comforting guide we talked about, would now be a bewildering, repetitive slap against the hull, each wave indistinguishable from the last. The birds, they'd be a terrifying sign of nothing, just endless ocean. Your provisions, those carefully prepared bundles of taro and coconut from Section 14, would dwindle to nothing. This scenario, my friend, is why the accidental argument quickly bumps into a wall of grim statistics. Studies on actual drift voyages, unfortunate modern-day incidents where people are truly lost at sea, show a survival rate that would make a lottery winner blush. Most simply don't make it. You might survive for a few weeks, maybe even a couple of months if you're exceptionally resourceful and perhaps a little unhinged. But finding a tiny speck of land in the vastness of the Pacific after an unplanned drift, that's less luck and more divine intervention on steroids. Now, let's pivot to the counter-argument, the one that makes your internal explorer sigh with satisfaction. Intentional voyaging. Think back to the sheer sophistication of the Vaca, those magnificent double-hulled canoes. These weren't flimsy fishing skiffs. These were purpose-built vessels, designed for long-distance travel, capable of carrying not just people, but entire ecosystems. The consistent presence of specific cultigens, taro, breadfruit, yams, and domesticated animals. Pigs, chickens, dogs on newly settled islands across the vast Polynesian Triangle strongly suggests intentional, pre-planned voyages rather than random drift. You don't accidentally bring a whole garden and a petting zoo with you when you're just trying not to die. That's an act of deliberate foresight. That's a migration, a colonization, not a desperate escape. The evidence for intentionality isn't just in the cargo, but in the very fabric of their knowledge. Recall the Wayfinding Academy from Section 11, where navigators trained for years, memorizing the subtle shifts in swell patterns, the precise arc of stars, the flight paths of specific birds. They didn't just know their immediate surroundings. Their mental maps, as we explored in Section 12, stretched thousands of miles, charting currents and winds across immense stretches of ocean. This wasn't guesswork. It was a complex, inherited science. When you can reliably sail against prevailing winds, as these navigators often did, or return to a tiny island after being out of sight for weeks, you're not just getting lucky, you're navigating. Consider the expanding target strategy we touched upon in section 16. That's a sophisticated search pattern, not a random wandering. If you're simply drifting, you just go where the current takes you. But if you're deliberately searching for land, you zigzag, you broaden your scope, you use all those environmental cues to increase your odds. It's like comparing someone throwing darts blindfolded to a professional dart player. One might occasionally hit the bullseye, but only one does it consistently. The Polynesians were, by all accounts, dart players who had mastered the art. There's also a whispered speculation among some researchers, a quirky tidbit, that certain ghost islands that once existed, but are now submerged due to tectonic activity or sea level rise, might have served as accidental waypoints for earlier, less equipped voyagers, essentially acting as temporary floating gas stations before they sank beneath the waves. Imagine stumbling upon a forgotten landmass, only for it to slowly, imperceptibly vanish behind you. Bit creepy, right? While fascinating, this remains a fringe theory and doesn't explain the overwhelming evidence of deliberate migration. And what about the sheer scale of their expansion? The archaeological record, particularly the Lapita legacy we discussed in section 17, shows a remarkably consistent cultural package: pottery styles, adze types, burial practices, spreading rapidly across vast distances. This isn't random populations bumping into each other and sharing ideas. This is a coherent cultural movement, a deliberate expansion by people who knew where they were going and how to get there. Genetic studies further solidify this, showing clear migration patterns and relationships between island populations that align with intentional voyaging. You don't get such clean genetic footprints from a series of desperate, unplanned accidents. The idea that every voyage was a desperate gamble feels, frankly, a bit insulting to the sheer ingenuity and bravery of these people. While undoubtedly some journeys faced unforeseen challenges and probably ended in disaster, the ocean, as you now know, is a fickle mistress. The overall pattern points to a society obsessed with exploration, driven by a deep understanding of their environment. Perhaps it was resource depletion on their home islands, or perhaps social hierarchies pushed younger generations to seek new lands, or maybe, just maybe, it was the sheer unadulterated human urge to see what lay beyond the horizon. A bit like that time you accidentally ordered spicy instead of mild, and ended up discovering your new favorite dish, but on a much, much grander and frankly life-threatening scale. The experimental voyages, like the famous Hokulea, a modern replica of an ancient voyaging canoe, have proven unequivocally that these intentional voyages were not only possible but replicable using only traditional navigation techniques. The sight of Hokulea, sailing accurately across thousands of miles of open ocean without instruments, serves as a powerful testament. It's a physical manifestation of the knowledge we've been uncovering. It's one thing to theorize about using stars and swells. It's another to see it in action, delivering a crew safely to a tiny island. So, while the debate continues to simmer, with scholars meticulously examining every shred of evidence, the prevailing wind, if you will, definitely favors the intentionality argument. It's not to say there wasn't an element of chance, or that every single deviation was perfectly planned. The ocean is vast and mistakes happen. But to reduce these epic journeys to mere accidental drifts is to miss the incredible story of human innovation, courage, and a profound, intimate knowledge of the natural world. It's the difference between blindly stumbling into a treasure chest and meticulously following a map to find it. And trust me, the Polynesians had maps, not etched on parchment, but held in the keenest of minds, guided by the whispers of the wind and the ancient rhythms of the sea. You've been listening to the whispers of scholarly debate, haven't you? Whether those ancient mariners were master planners or simply master drifters, pushed by the capricious hand of fate. Now imagine a different kind of whisper, one that carries the scent of modern-day determination, the hum of ambition echoing across the Pacific, not just from centuries past, but from within living memory. You're standing on a dock, the sun warm on your face, the salt tang sharp in the air. Before you, a magnificent double-hulled canoe, sleek and purposeful, bobs gently in the swell. It's not just a replica. It's a living, breathing testament to a knowledge almost lost, a skill almost forgotten. And you'd probably get seasick just looking at it, let alone navigating across an ocean without Google Maps. Your phone would be dead in an hour, and then what? Good luck finding a charging port out there. This, my sleepy friend, is the Hokulea. Not just a boat, but a vessel of hope, a floating classroom, a cultural revival in fiberglass and wood. In the mid-20th century, as Western technology permeated every corner of the globe, the incredible wayfinding traditions of Polynesia, those intricate mental maps and celestial charts, were teetering on the edge of oblivion. The knowledge, once passed down through generations, was fading like an old photograph left in the sun. Scholars, convinced that the Pacific had been settled by accidental drift, dismissed the notion of intentional voyages, effectively telling an entire people their ancestors weren't quite as brilliant as they thought. And you can imagine how well that went over. But then, a spark. A group of visionary Hawaiians, determined to prove their ancestors' genius and rekindle a dormant spirit, conceived of the Polynesian Voyaging Society in the early 1970s. Their audacious goal? To build a traditional voyaging canoe and navigate it, using only ancient methods, across thousands of miles of open ocean. The first challenge, beyond the actual building of a vessel that echoed the majestic Vaka of old, was finding someone who still held the flame of true non-instrument navigation. Most of the Polynesian navigators had passed on, their wisdom unrecorded. It was like trying to find a unicorn who could also tell you the time using only the angle of a shadow. They found him. On the tiny Micronesian island of Satawal, a master navigator named Maupiailug, one of the last PWO master navigators, still practiced the ancient art. He was a human GPS, a walking, breathing repository of celestial wisdom, swell patterns, and bird behaviors. He didn't use charts or compasses or even a sextant. He used his senses, his memory, and generations of accumulated knowledge. He looked at the stars, felt the ocean, and listened to the wind, much like those ancient mariners you imagined yourself being. You remember those mental maps, the wayfinding academy where navigators practically downloaded the universe into their minds. Mao embodied all of that. His agreement to teach and guide the Hokulea's first voyage was a pivotal moment, a lifeline thrown across centuries to pull a dying tradition back from the brink. In 1976, the Hokulea embarked on its maiden voyage from Hawaii to Tahiti, a journey of approximately 2,500 nautical miles. Imagine the skepticism, the raised eyebrows from those who believed it couldn't be done, that it was a fool's errand, a nostalgic fantasy. But with Maupiailug at the helm, interpreting the sun's arc, remember how subtle those cues were. Reading the complex language of ocean swells, those deep, underlying pulses of the earth, and using the stars as his unwavering celestial compass, the Hokulea sailed true. The fact that a traditional Polynesian voyaging canoe, navigating solely by ancestral methods, successfully completed this journey is a mainstream historical fact that dramatically reshaped our understanding of Pacific migration, proving beyond doubt that intentional, highly skilled voyages were not only possible but probable. It was the ultimate mic drop in the academic world. The arrival of the Hokulea in Tahiti was met with a monumental outpouring of joy and cultural pride, a reawakening of identity that resonated across the Pacific. It wasn't just a boat arriving, it was history sailing back into view. The success of that voyage wasn't the end, but the beginning. It sparked a renaissance, igniting a passion for traditional navigation, canoe building, and Polynesian culture that continues to flourish today. Generations of young Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders who once felt disconnected from their voyaging past now had a tangible link, a living inspiration. It taught them that their ancestors weren't just lucky, but brilliant. Since that first transformative voyage, the Polynesian Voyaging Society and other groups have continued the Hokulea's legacy, undertaking ambitious journeys across the Pacific and even circumnavigating the globe, all while adhering to non-instrument wayfinding. They've trained new generations of navigators, passing on Mao's wisdom and integrating it with what they can deduce from historical accounts and archaeological findings. It's an ongoing, rigorous curriculum, arguably even harder now because you're not starting from a lifetime immersed in the sea, but from a world of screens. You can't just binge-watch a tutorial on how to read a wave pattern, you know. It requires years of intense study, observation, and getting very, very wet. A quirky tidbit that demonstrates this dedication. Modern wayfinders on Hokulea voyages will often blindfold themselves during certain training exercises to hone their sensitivity to wave patterns and wind shifts, mimicking the reliance on pure feel that ancient navigators must have possessed, especially on dark, cloudy nights. They practice visualizing the star compass, that mental map of the rising and setting points of celestial bodies, until it's as real to them as the back of their hand. They still interpret the language of clouds, seeking those unique land-formed cumulus clouds, and they listen for the squawking, land-bound birds just as their ancestors did. They even taste the ocean, searching for subtle changes in salinity that indicate proximity to fresh water sources or different current systems. But here's where the scholarly debate still lingers, quietly, in hushed academic hallways. Historians still argue whether the modern revival, as impressive as it is, has truly recovered the full breadth of the ancient wayfinding knowledge. Are there subtle nuances, forgotten star alignments, or specific current readings that have been lost forever? Or has the ingenuity of modern navigators, combined with Mao's invaluable teachings, actually recreated something even more robust, a hybrid wisdom that honors the past while adapting to the present? Perhaps some of the finer points, like whether a particular type of rare fish schooling truly meant an island was precisely 100 miles away, or just somewhere over there-ish, remain elusive. It's hard to interview someone from 800 AD about their daily fish-finding habits, you know. Regardless of the extent of complete recovery, the echoes of Hokulea resonate deeply. Every successful voyage, every new navigator trained, is a testament to the enduring human spirit of exploration and the profound intelligence of those who came before us. It's a powerful reminder that our connection to the natural world, to the sun, moon, stars, and the rhythmic pulse of the ocean, is not just a relic of the past, but a vital part of who we are, even in this age of digital maps and instant gratification. They prove that you don't need a fancy gadget to find your way home, just a deep understanding of your world, and maybe a very strong stomach. You feel the deck sway beneath your feet, a familiar rhythm after weeks at sea. The stars are beginning to emerge, pinpricks of light in a deepening indigo canvas, each one a silent, ancient guide. The cool spray of the ocean kisses your face, carrying with it the scent of salt and distance, a fragrance that has become as comforting as a familiar embrace. This isn't just a physical journey. It's a profound immersion into a way of being, a connection to the very pulse of the planet. You felt the vastness, imagined the isolation, and perhaps, for a fleeting moment, understood the quiet courage it took to launch into the unknown. Let's be honest, if you were truly out here, without the accumulated knowledge of generations whispering in your ear, without the ingrained instincts these navigators possessed, you'd be a tiny, lost speck, probably wondering if you packed enough snacks. And your phone? Oh, bless its heart, it's just a very expensive paperweight out here, signaling nothing but its own irrelevance. The legacy of these Polynesian navigators isn't merely one of discovery. It's a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and an almost spiritual connection to their environment. They didn't just find islands. They truly lived with the ocean, understood its moods, and spoke its language. Remember how you learned to read the clouds like a vast, ever-changing book, or how even the most subtle swell told you a story of distant storms or unseen landmasses. This wasn't just survival. It was a profound way of life, where every element of nature was a crucial piece of a cosmic puzzle. Consider this. These people, without metal tools, without charts beyond the ones etched in their memories, colonized an area of the planet larger than all land masses combined, stretching from the frosty peaks of New Zealand to the sun-drenched shores of Easter Island. That's like setting out to explore every continent on Earth, but only by canoe and without Google Maps or even a good, strong coffee shop along the way. Their audacious spirit is almost unfathomable in our modern, hyper-connected world, where a slightly slow Wi-Fi signal can cause a minor crisis. Their connection to the ocean was holistic, a tapestry woven from countless threads of observation and intuition. They understood the nuances of marine life beneath the keel, reading the behavior of specific birds as flying land detectors, and even sensing the subtle shifts in wind patterns. It was a sophisticated, living map that resided not on parchment, but within the collective consciousness of their navigators, passed down through rigorous training in what amounted to the world's first true wayfinding academy. Imagine your final exam being a 1,000-mile open ocean voyage. A quirky tidbit that always fascinates me is the reported ability of some master navigators to perceive the smell of distant islands. Not a literal smell like a perfumed breeze, but rather the subtle shift in the oceanic air, perhaps carrying the scent of specific vegetation, or the faint, almost imperceptible hum of insect life carried on the wind currents. It speaks to an almost hypersensory awareness, a deep attunement to their environment that most of us have long since forgotten, buried under layers of concrete and digital distractions. It makes you wonder if our noses are just lazy, or if we simply haven't given them the proper training. This incredible expansion, spanning millennia, still sparks lively debate among scholars. Historians still argue whether some of the earliest Polynesian voyages were primarily driven by intentional exploration, or if accidental drift, followed by a planned return, played a more significant role in the initial discovery of certain remote islands. There's no single, universally accepted answer, and the sheer scale of the Pacific often makes definitive conclusions elusive. But regardless of the initial impetus, the subsequent colonization was undoubtedly a testament to deliberate, highly skilled voyaging. The revival of ancient wayfinding techniques, famously epitomized by the Hercules echoes in recent decades, serves as a powerful reminder that this knowledge was never truly lost, merely dormant. It demonstrates that the principles are timeless, and the human capacity for deep connection with the natural world remains. When you hear the stories of modern navigators guiding vessels across vast stretches of ocean without instruments, relying solely on stars, swells, and the wisdom of their ancestors, it's impossible not to feel a profound sense of awe. As our own world grapples with the complexities of climate change and environmental degradation, the legacy of Polynesian navigators offers a quiet, powerful lesson. They didn't conquer the ocean, they coexisted with it. They didn't exploit its resources, they respected its rhythms. Their enduring spirit of exploration wasn't about dominating nature, but understanding and moving gracefully within it. It's a connection that still resonates, a gentle hum beneath the surface of the waves, a whisper in the wind that rustles through the palm fronds on a distant shore. Now, as the last remnants of the day fade and the gentle darkness embraces you, take a moment to truly appreciate that incredible journey. You've sailed across an ocean of time, learning from those who saw the sea not as a barrier, but as a boundless highway connecting distant dreams. Their wisdom, etched in the stars and carried on the currents, reminds us that the greatest discoveries often lie not in what we conquer, but in what we deeply understand and humbly connect with. Let the images of the sturdy vaca, the constellations wheeling overhead, and the endless, comforting rhythm of the waves gently wash over you. Feel the quiet peace that comes from knowing how deeply connected humanity can be to the vast, living world around us. As the last lingering sensations of the salty air and the oceans soften into stillness, let your mind drift gently, cradled by the profound legacy of those who truly found their way home by starlight and swell. Sweet dreams.